Digital terrestrial television, what is it? Why is South Africa lagging behind seemingly? And this matter has created quite a bit of a stir amongst policymakers and the broadcasters. Welcome to Our City Matters. My name is Sekoetlane Phamodi. Tonight we are talking about DTT, Digital Terrestrial Transmission. It's a new policy seemingly to South Africa, though the rest of the world has begun to show signs that it is moving on and getting with the times. But the matter in South Africa is seemingly hamstrung by policy discussions as well as the broadcasters fighting over what type of direction this ought to take. Tonight in our studios we are poised to welcome Mark Weinberg, who is the coordinator for the Right to Know campaign, also Sekoetlane Phamodi. He is from the SOS Coalition. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Cape Town TV.
Thanks for having us.
Perhaps to start off with you, Sekoetlane, what is DTT?
Okay. So DTT, which stands for Digital Terrestrial Television, is really a new way of sending the signals through the airwaves so they can reach our televisions. At the moment, what's happening is that we are receiving our signal through what is called analog signal.
Yeah.
That just simply means that it's a single band of frequency that moves through the air, goes into your aerial and straight into your television. It's a very clunky, inefficient way of transmitting television. Mm-hmm. Digital television, which is what we're moving across into, simply means that that signal is going to be compressed and digitized in such a way that it uses a far more efficient method of transmitting the signal through the airwaves.
But I can assume it opens up the spectrum as well.
And
so
it opens up the spectrum in such a way that there's more television channels available for us. We'll be able to receive radio services through our televisions as well. And in addition to that, it releases what is called a spectrum, or just simply the airwaves, that mobile communication operators like MTN and Cell C, as well as other providers of network services, to be able to use this frequency more efficiently to enable more, theoretically at least, to enable more competition and driving the prices down for the cost to communicate.
Well, we haven't even got to it yet, but we've already seen and begun to see competition, which we'll get into through the course of our program. But just to stay with you, Sekoetlane, why then have we seen this matter really stagnate in South Africa the way that we did? Because, I mean, we missed a deadline that was June last year, international deadline, and we're yet to really get there.
The first key area in terms of where the problem lies has been around the coordination capacity, particularly around the Department of Communications. So just about a decade ago, the Ministry of Communications then understood that this was something that we had to do, and they were negotiating this with what is called the International Telecommunications Union. It's basically the UN body that governs all things to do with telecommunications in the world. And they agreed that this is a move that the country and the world as a whole had to make. Then from there, the department had to develop policy, which they did by 2008. Then they were supposed to establish what is supposed to be a multi-stakeholder body that brings together broadcasters, telecoms operators, the regulator in ICASA, as well as civil society to participate.
And has that happened?
So that happened, and then it was dissolved very suddenly. And since then, it has been a stop-start motion to try and get this thing off the ground,
and
to the extent that they were unable to really do it until last year.
Okay, and until last year, I understand a lot of the fight has been around encryption. Why is that so important, Mark?
It's very important for the viewers to understand that this isn't a very complicated technical issue that isn't very important to our lives. We live in a world where there's so much information around us, and most South Africans are stuck watching 2 or 3 TV stations. Digital TV would mean we could watch 20, 30 TV stations in our homes, and it means we wouldn't be dependent on the big corporations, SABC, ETV, and MultiChoice Naspers that control our TV today. There would be room for many more, much more diverse television. So in a sense, the reason we failed to move over to digital TV has less to do with the technical aspects and the process and more to do with real power.
But
those in control of the TVs, in particular NASPERS, who controls multi-choice, are frustrating the process. They don't want ordinary South Africans to get all these new channels. They actually want to force as many people as they can to go out and buy DSTV decoders.
But the reality, though, is that it seems that this is being stagnated over that technical matter, the encryption. Some wanting encryption, others doesn't want it. Why is encryption so important?
Yeah. Well, encryption, some argue that encryption is important to protect, we're going to talk a bit, I imagine, about set-top boxes, the decoders.
Yeah.
The government thinks we have to have encryption so that when they publicly fund a lot of these decoders, they don't get stolen and sold again for free. The broadcasters think encryption is important because they want to protect the intellectual property of the very expensive American shows like your House of Cards.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be pirated. Right to Know has raised concerns about encryption.
And what is your position?
Well, our position is ambiguous. Some of us acknowledge that there are good reasons for encryption. Some of us are very concerned that, like we see with water, if you don't pay for your TV is going to be cut off.
And that's the control you fear from government. We are going to have to go for a break, but very quickly, what is your take on encryption?
We at SAS stand behind encryption. We believe that it's really important to, firstly, facilitate new entrants to come onto...
And I want to get into the why. Do stay with us. This is Our City Matters at Cape Town TV. We're talking about DTT. Do stay with us. Our City Matters. We are talking about DTT this evening. In studio, we have Mark Weinberg as well as Sekoetlane Phamodi from the SOS. Now, Sekoetlane, you said that you are in favor of encryption. Yes. Give me a reason why. Mark is saying it will allow the government undue control over, whether or not we're paying for those services.
No. I think that is. It is a fear and a concern that we might have, but nevertheless, we don't believe at all that we're going to get to that point at all in this country, given the constitutional guarantees to information access that we have, particularly through broadcasting services. So, firstly, with encryption, as Mark rightly put out, we are then broadcasters then able to protect the intellectual property not just of the American content that is being pumped into our screens and overtaking our airwaves, but also of the South African content that does get pirated within the region and also abroad. So we need to protect that content. In addition to that, we also want to make sure that we move from a situation where we only have 3 stations that are in charge of our airwaves to one where we have more broadcasters coming in, producing more stations, so that we actually have what is called content diversity. So we don't feel like we're just, getting what the SABC is giving us and what ETV is giving us.
But one of the challenges with encryption is that a lot of these broadcasters use different forms of encryption. There's Nagravision, there's NDS, MultiChoice use Eredito, etc. So surely this is going to be quite a bit of a headache to negotiate one level of encryption.
Now this is the smokescreen that MultiChoice has used to try and frustrate the process of the migration, right? So firstly, MultiChoice really has no business engaging or trying to meddle in the affairs of what happens on terrestrial broadcasting. They are by and large a satellite broadcaster. They use their own system. It's a subscription-based broadcaster, and really it doesn't impact very much on what happens in the free-to-air space, which is what the vast majority of the people in this country, 10 out of 15 million households, are actually receiving their TV through. What needs to happen is that it's the SABC and ETV and the community broadcasters that should be negotiating an outcome that can actually suit all of them. That's first and foremost. What the SABC's position has been on this has been that we will go where MultiChoice goes, because they believe that they have a greater chance of success casting their lot together with multi-choice and turning their backs on the people of this country as far as content diversity is concerned. And we actually should be concerned about that.
All right, and let's quickly talk about diversification of our channels. Mark, the challenges though is with the spectrum being opened up, the reality though is that the spectrum will be grabbed by these existing three broadcasters, the SABC, ETV, as well as Naspers or multi-choice. They will still continue to dominate the spectrum. Should the government or the communications department not perhaps consider, with the amount of up-and-coming community TV stations like Cape Town TV, consider allocating some of these channels to such broadcasters?
Yeah, well, it's not the Wild West where everyone just takes what they want. It is a highly regulated process. I think it's useful to think of spectrum, or what we call the airwaves, the same way we think about land in this country. It's a national resource, it's our wealth, and our government should use it to develop all our people. So there's a body called ICASA, which regulates and gives people TV licenses to use the airwaves. Over the last 2 years, they've been exploring what the digital future will look like and carving up the airwaves. And Right to Know's been to them to protest, SOS has been to protest, because of our government's business-friendly policy. You're quite right that the vast majority of the airwaves have currently been allocated to big private businesses, as well as the SABC, ETV, Mnet, and then there's a big chunk of new airwaves allocated to emerging businesses, which we imagine will be 1 or 2 large corporations that are BEE fronted. Community television has been squeezed into 5% of the airwaves. There will be 2 channels out of over 20 channels will be non-profit community. They won't be broadcasting for profit. They won't be broadcasting to please their advertisers. They'll be broadcasting to serve the people. And as Right to Know, we think it's unacceptable. We think ICASA needs to go back and re-look at how these airwaves have been allocated and give a much bigger proportion to public broadcasting and community media. In particular, we've got a very exciting proposal. We're working with CTV, SOS, and a bunch of other organizations to ask the question, why can we not have a national human rights program?
Yes.
A station dedicated only to matters of improving the lives of our people.
Well, those are seriously questions, and I think there's now a platform for it. The reality, though, is that we need government to allocate the platform for where it is most needed. Sekoetlane, of course, part of this issue of encryption, it deals with the set-top boxes. A very hotly contested topic. Who will be manufacturing it? Is it cheaply made? Will it be susceptible to bugging of some sort? Speak to us about why set-top boxes is so important.
Okay, so the set-top box, firstly, is a decoder. I think that we should actually lose the language of set-top boxes.
Yeah, it's a fancy word.
It's a fancy word for a decoder. It's a box that sits on your television set. And it decodes the digital signal so that your TV can be able to understand it. Now, this box, at the moment, we don't really know how much it's going to cost to manufacture, and therefore how much it's going to cost to buy. Government initially said that everyone in this country will have to buy it because it will be just too expensive to manufacture and then issue these boxes out for free. And SOS and RTK stood firmly against that, and we campaigned and won a commitment from government to ensure that households earning up to 3,200 Rand per month are actually guaranteed a free box.
Well, what is that amount? I think something like a few million?
It's about 4 million. It's about 4 million households of the 10 million TV owning households in the country. Now, we are still stuck with this gap where there are going to be 2 million households earning between 3,200 Rand and 6,500 Rand per month. We know that in this country, where we have to pay for education, we have to pay for healthcare, we have to pay for our security because the state has failed us in delivering quality services in this regard, we are now having to pay to watch our own televisions.
And that's what I want to get into when we do return. What is the way forward on this matter? Do stay with us. We're talking DTT. It is Our City Matters. My name is Sekoetlane Phamodi. We have Mark Weinberg in studio. He is from the Right to Know campaign. Sekoetlane Phamodi is from SOS. He's also in studio with us this evening as we take a look at DTT, Digital Terrestrial Transmission, or TV. It's a, well, not so much new system, but certainly something that South Africa is still beginning to get to grips with, and lots of policy discussion as well as issues around corporate interest is what we're reflecting on this evening. Now, Sekoetlane, on the issue of how it has stagnated over the while. I understand there's a bit of a program in the Northern Cape at the moment where there's a test run of some sort. Have you been following? What's the story?
Yeah, the Northern Cape was identified as the first test site in terms of rolling out DTT, mainly because we've got the square kilometre array, this massive radio frequency telescope that we won to be able to host in the country. Now that interferes, the signals that we get from TV interfere with that array, so they said, let's go there first. In terms of the rollout, an initial soft launch was initiated back in 2012, and then again in about 2014, and then again now in 2015, where people have been asked to register to get these subsidized set-top boxes, and then to get off the airwaves that are interfering with the spectrum.
Yeah.
What we know of that is that in the Northern Cape, as well as in various other provinces, I think there are now 2 additional provinces where this has started, the program has started to be getting rolled out. There's been no more than about 13,000 people subscribed. And of those 13,000 people who have been subscribed, we understand that there hasn't been any more than 4,000 or 5,000 boxes issued to households that actually qualify to receive the subsidized box. So there are all sorts of hurdles that one has to get through to be able to access even the government subsidized box for those who qualify for it. Never mind those who now actually have to go and purchase one where they haven't been manufactured or put out to retail yet.
Well, little hope then, Mark, that we will be able to receive this process and be part of DTT, at least poor people.
Yeah, I think there are 2 important points. The first is that we might reach a point where we have to say that the digital migration process is a failure. We've seen massive fragmentation. Those that can afford are taking up DSTV boxes and they won't want to get a terrestrial box. Those that can't afford are taking up one of the free satellite services or are going to get cut off. Because it's accepted that when you migrate to digital television, the poorest and the most marginal people will get cut off, and the policy objective is to keep that number as small as possible. What's coming out of the Northern Cape is really pathetic. Pilot, see how it will work. People haven't gone out to buy boxes. They haven't even bothered to go and pick up free boxes. So I think we're looking at the fragmentation of television. We're all going to be on different platforms, and that has serious implications for our democracy. But we're also looking at the privatization of television and the very high risk of an apartheid television universe, where those that are on DSTV Premium, those that are on DSTV, the lower ones,
Compact
and then those that are waiting to get some digital public service, just like our health system, just like our security system, education system. South Africa is fragmenting into really 2 separate worlds. The key to solving our problems is dialogue.
Yeah.
And if South Africans are not watching the same television and sharing the same discussions and information, our democracy is at risk.
I want to pick up on Mark's point there about the fragmentation of our broadcasters, our TV channels, basically that which we watch. If DTT were to be successful, and let's hope it does, right? That am I going to be sitting with my set-top box or my transmitter that I get from government? Am I going to be sitting with DSTV as well? Am I going to be sitting with OVHD from ETV? Do I have to get all these 3 different boxes?
The very strong likelihood is that you're going to have to stack up all of the boxes of all of the services on top of your television at a great cost to you, which is another reason why we stand behind encryption, because it creates an easy one-box solution whereby the bulk of operators are actually on the government-issued box, box, and we now don't have to be trying to stack up as many boxes as we can onto our services at great expense to our very already stretched incomes.
In terms of where you see this process end, where is it at the moment? I understand, yes, there's the pilot project. Have parties been brought together on the issue of encryption, the set-top box?
Well, unfortunately, the process of bringing parties together to come to an agreement, which was initiated by the former minister, Yunus Karim, was then overturned by this new minister for reasons unbeknown to us. We suspect that a big part of it is around how the division of the spectrum pie is going to be done further down the line, as well as how the division of the set-top box tenders is going to be done further down the line. And unfortunately, it has now really impacted detrimentally to the people of this country. But nevertheless, if the process is successful, and if we come to a final resolution through the court cases that have been waged around this issue of encryption, hopefully we'll get to a point where we can now have an easy moving system whereby people can get registered to receive this box, that a subsidy is granted to all households, particularly those earning up to an amount of 6,500 per month, because those are poor households that need the help from government, and then we can all start engaging in dialogue through a common platform that we can all access.
And that is the objective, isn't it, Mark?
That's ideal. But in South Africa today, we can't approach this thing with naively. We're talking about billions of rands in public money that's going to be spent. We're talking about who's going to control the airwaves for the next 50 plus years. The stakes are very high, and you can't ignore. There's no way to explain, for example, SABC's collusion with MultiChoice without suspecting that there's an element of corruption. There's no way to explain the changing of ministers every 2 or 3 years and the changing of government policy without suspecting that there's an element of corruption. Big business, big money, trying to make profit out of what should be a public service. Our access to entertainment and to information.
Well, that's, I guess, the challenge, and so we will look very closely at how Minister Faith Muthambi does, in fact, move on this particular matter. Certainly no proper clarity on it, though there are already some tests being done in the Northern Cape, and certainly we hope that South Africans will begin to benefit from DTT. There is this threat about being switched off, and what an impact that is likely to have on you sitting at home watching us through this particular broadcast. I am yet to see and understand, but nonetheless we'll leave it there for this evening. From myself, Tashirik Trubari, Mark Weinberg from the Right to Know campaign, Sekoetlane Phamodi from the SOS team, you have a good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.